The morning sun filtered softly through the blinds of Camila's office window as she leaned back in her chair, holding her phone against her ear. "I just wanted to hear your voice," she said with a gentle smile, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. On the other end, Silas's voice was warm, tender. "You always know how to make my day start better." "I miss you already," he replied. Camila's heart fluttered at his words. They had been married for 5 years, and though their schedules had grown hectic, she tried to believe the affection remained. "Dinner tonight?" she asked, hopeful. "Absolutely, just us," Silas assured. They exchanged a few more words before Camila giggled softly and said, "All right, I'll let you go now." "Love you," he responded. "Love you more." She tapped her screen to end the call, only to realize she hadn't pressed it properly. A moment of static followed before the call unexpectedly continued. At first, she was about to disconnect, assuming it was just a delay. But then she heard Silas again, only this time the sweetness was gone. "She bought it again," he chuckled, a hint of ridicule in his tone. Camila's heart slowed. Her fingers stiffened around the phone. Before she could process that, another voice, a woman's, joined in. "She's so desperate to be loved, it's pathetic." The laughter that followed made Camila's blood run cold. That voice. That laugh. It was Lillian, her best friend, her maid of honor, the woman who had cried beside her on her wedding day. Camila didn't make a sound. She stayed frozen, phone pressed to her ear, as the muffled background noise from their end continued. 2 people laughing at her behind her back. Her stomach clenched. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation disguised as love. Her ears rang, but she stayed on the line, breath shallow. As the weight of the moment settled, Camila's eyes filled with tears. Something deep inside her shattered, but silently. She hadn't expected this call to be the beginning of unraveling everything she thought was real. Camila sat frozen in her chair, the phone still against her ear, the air in her office turning heavy and stifling. Her pulse echoed in her head as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. Lillian's laughter, unmistakable and cruel, still lingered like smoke in her ears. "She thinks I still care about her sad little journal," Lillian went on. "She writes like she's living in a fairy tale. And you play Prince Charming so well." Camila clenched her jaw, feeling heat rise in her throat, a mixture of rage and sorrow. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't end the call. She couldn't. It felt like watching a car crash she couldn't stop, except she was the one behind the wheel and the one getting hit. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Lillian asked, her voice softer now. "No," Silas replied. "She's too wrapped up in us to even notice the truth." Camila finally lowered the phone, pressing it to her lap as if it had burned her. Her heart wasn't just broken, it was humiliated. She had given Lillian everything, her trust, her tears, her triumphs. And Silas? She had built her life around him, believed him to be her partner, her safe place. Now, the warmth in his voice felt like venom in retrospect. For minutes, she sat in stillness, staring at the edge of her desk, her breath shallow. The betrayal came not like a slap, but like a slow suffocation. Every smile, every shared meal, every inside joke between Lillian and Silas suddenly twisted into something foul. "Why?" she whispered to herself, barely able to hear her own voice. "Why would they do this to me?" She felt the weight of the world press against her chest. The call hadn't just exposed betrayal, it had stripped her of her dignity. And yet, as the sun continued to shine through the blinds, as papers lay scattered on her desk, Camila realized something deeper. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about how little they thought of her. And that hurt more than anything. When Camila finally stood from her chair, the weight of her body felt unfamiliar, like she was moving through wet cement. Her eyes landed on her left hand, the wedding band catching a glint of light as if mocking her. She twisted it slowly, the once cherished symbol now feeling like a shackle around her finger. She sank into the couch in her office, lost in the swirl of memories that began resurfacing with sharp clarity. Lillian had always been there, through her job loss, through the miscarriage, through the nights Camila called crying. "I'm so lucky to have a best friend like you," she had said once, resting her head on Lillian's shoulder. Now, that memory left a bitter taste in her mouth. How long had Lillian been pretending? How long had Silas been lying? The betrayal wasn't just a crack, it was a landslide. She lifted the ring again and whispered to herself, "What did I do to deserve this?" Her thoughts took her to the last night she and Silas sat on the balcony sipping tea. He had held her hand, kissed her temple, and said, "We'll get through anything together." She had believed him, foolishly. She remembered Lillian showing up uninvited that same night with wine and laughter, sliding easily into their space, like a second wife. But Camila hadn't seen it then. She had mistaken it for love. Her naivety made her ache. She stared out the window now, her office overlooking a quiet street, people walking by with coffees and briefcases, oblivious to the implosion happening inside her. She looked down again at her hand and slowly, carefully removed the ring. She placed it on her desk and stared at it as if it were a living thing, full of lies. For now, she wouldn't throw it away. Not yet. It wasn't just a ring, it was evidence. Proof that she had loved. And that they had betrayed it. Her grief wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly silent, curling into her like smoke under a door. That evening, Camila sat on the couch in the living room, legs tucked beneath her, the television humming in the background, unnoticed. The house was unusually quiet, but her mind wasn't. Every creak of the wall clock, every shift of the wind against the windows, seemed louder than usual. Her hands were cold. She didn't look up until she heard the familiar jingle of keys. Silas was home. Her stomach turned. "Babe," he called as he stepped in, smiling, carrying a takeout bag. "I picked up your favorite rice from Delia's." She nodded, barely lifting her eyes from the throw pillow she clutched. Silas walked over, leaned down, and kissed her forehead. "Rough day?" he asked. Camila gave a faint smile. It took everything in her not to flinch. His breath was still warm with lies, and yet he stood there, normal, unsuspecting, loving. He had no idea she knew. Silas sat beside her, unwrapping the food, chatting about traffic and some project at work. Camila responded when necessary, short nods, one-word answers. He didn't notice the change, or maybe he did and didn't care. As he picked up his fork, he said, "By the way, Lillian's planning some spa thing for next month. You should go. You need it." The mention of her name made Camila stiffen. "I'll think about it," she replied. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. But inside, she was screaming. She studied his face as he spoke, the way his eyes sparkled, the way his dimple showed when he laughed, and she wondered how someone could fake affection so effortlessly. She wanted to scream, "I heard you," but something held her back. Not fear, strategy. She would not give him the satisfaction of an outburst. Not yet. Camila decided in that moment that silence would be her weapon. And so she smiled wide, warm, believable. And for the first time in years, her smile was entirely a lie. In the days that followed, Camila spoke less but watched more. She moved through her home like a shadow, quietly noting Silas's patterns, what time he got home, when he reached for his phone, how he paused before answering certain messages. She didn't ask questions anymore. Not because she didn't want answers, but because she already had the most painful one. He didn't truly love her. Her silence became so consistent that Silas began to notice. One night, as they lay in bed, backs turned to each other, he asked softly, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" Camila stared at the wall, her throat dry. "Just tired," she said. It was the only truth she could offer without trembling. Tired of pretending, tired of hiding her pain, tired of hearing their voices replay in her mind like a cursed recording. She began writing in a leather-bound journal she hadn't touched in months. It became her refuge, her only way to scream without making a sound. She scribbled memories that now felt tainted, their wedding vows, Lillian's toast, the weekend getaways they'd planned. She also wrote down questions she could never ask aloud. "Did you ever mean the words you whispered in my ear?" And, "How could you both sit across from me with straight faces and hug me?" Silas noticed the journal once and teased, "Back to being poetic again?" She forced a chuckle. "Something like that," she muttered, quickly closing it. In truth, every page was stained with quiet devastation. It wasn't anger that consumed her, it was mourning. Mourning the loss of two people she had loved and trusted beyond reason. And yet, every morning, she got up. She dressed, she made breakfast. She existed in the space between brokenness and survival, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. One afternoon, while staring blankly at her computer, Camila's phone vibrated with a message from Lillian. The notification made her chest tighten. Reluctantly, she opened it. It was a meme. A cartoon of a couple lying in bed, with the woman wide-eyed while the man snored peacefully. The caption read, "Me pretending I'm not overthinking while he sleeps like a log." Camila stared at it for a long time, her lips pressed into a tight line. Then came the text beneath it. "This is so you, babe. LOL. You and your late-night anxiety spirals." The audacity made Camila blink back a wave of heat behind her eyes. She didn't respond. She couldn't. The woman who had helped plan her engagement party was now mocking her sincerity from both sides of the screen. Camila placed the phone face down and walked to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. There, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her eyes landed on the mirror, on the woman staring back, still dressed in corporate confidence, but emotionally threadbare. "You think I'm a joke," she whispered, addressing the phone on the counter as if Lillian could hear her. "You think I'm too weak to find out, too stupid to see it." She splashed water on her face, willing herself not to cry. She wouldn't give them her tears. Not today. Returning to her desk, she opened a new page in her journal and wrote one line. "I used to laugh at your jokes, Lillian. Now I just wonder if every laugh was at me." Camila didn't delete the message. She left it there as a quiet reminder of what betrayal looked like in the digital age. Pretty, funny, and hiding 1,000 knives behind a single emoji. That Friday evening, Camila and Silas hosted dinner for a few close friends. It was something they used to enjoy, but tonight it felt like a performance. She wore a soft blue blouse Silas had once complimented. Lillian arrived last, hugging Camila tightly and saying, "I've missed you." Camila returned the embrace, careful not to let her body stiffen. "Same here," she replied, the lie smooth on her tongue. The evening flowed with laughter, shared memories, and clinking glasses. But Camila noticed everything. The way Silas refilled Lillian's drink without being asked. His split-second eye contact when a private joke passed between them. The way Lillian brushed her fingers through her hair every time Silas made a joke. No one else seemed to notice, but Camila was no longer blind. As the evening wore on, the conversations grew louder, but Camila became quieter. When someone asked how work was going, she nodded vaguely, letting others fill the silence. Her mind was elsewhere. She watched Lillian throw her head back in laughter at something Silas said, watched how Lillian's fingers touched his arm briefly as she passed him a plate. "You two always finish each other's thoughts," a friend teased. Lillian smiled, but Camila cut in before Silas could answer. "They've always been annoyingly in sync," she said with a gentle laugh, letting the words land exactly where she wanted them. There was a brief pause, just long enough for Lillian to glance at her. Camila held her gaze, no longer the clueless wife, no longer the desperate fool. Something unspoken passed between them, and it wasn't friendship anymore. It was war, but with no witnesses and no weapons but silence. Camila sat in her reading nook the next morning, surrounded by the quiet hum of birds outside and the low ticking of the wall clock. Her teacup sat untouched. In her lap rested a photo album, one she hadn't opened in years. She flipped through the pages, each picture suddenly steeped in a new kind of betrayal. A photo from Silas's birthday last year showed Lillian leaning slightly toward him as Camila cut the cake. She remembered feeling grateful back then that her best friend had helped organize everything. Now that same smile Lillian wore seemed hollow, calculated. Camila studied every photo closely, her eyes sharp. In one, Lillian wore a necklace Silas had once claimed he'd bought for a co-worker's wife. She hadn't thought twice at the time. But now, every detail took on sinister clarity. Her thoughts stretched further back to when Lillian insisted Silas accompany her to a furniture store since Camila was busy with work. Or the time Silas came home late, saying he and Lillian had gotten caught up helping a friend move. She had believed it all. Camila pressed a hand to her chest. "How long?" she whispered to herself. "Was I really that blind?" She grabbed her journal again, writing down dates, occasions, excuses, everything that suddenly felt rehearsed. The threads had always been there, weaving a net around her while she smiled within it. But it wasn't just the lying that broke her, it was their confidence in her ignorance. They hadn't hidden well because they never thought she'd look. And that was the most painful insult of all. They saw her as someone who needed love so badly, she wouldn't notice when it was poisoned. By the weekend, Camila needed to escape the walls of her home before they swallowed her grief. She called her cousin Hannah, asking softly, "Are you home?" The tremble in her voice made Hannah pause before replying, "Always. Come." No questions, no judgment, just warmth. When Camila arrived, Hannah hugged her tightly. Camila didn't say a word, she didn't have to. Hannah led her inside, tucked her under a warm throw blanket, and made tea. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence only deep family love can hold. Finally, Hannah said gently, "You don't have to speak. But you don't have to carry it alone, either." Camila's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. She looked around Hannah's cozy living room, framed photos, the smell of cinnamon-scented candles, soft music playing in the background. For the first time in days, she felt her chest loosen. When she eventually found her voice, she didn't dive into details. "I heard something I wasn't supposed to," Camila said. Hannah took her hand without asking what it was. Camila added, "It broke more than just my heart." That was all she needed to say. Hannah leaned her head on Camila's shoulder. "Whatever it is, you don't deserve to sit in that pain alone," she said. That night, Camila slept at Hannah's for the first time in years. No nightmares came. Only a fragile peace, one she hadn't known she needed. Back home the next morning, Camila sat by the window with her journal opened flat across her knees. Sunlight spilled onto the pages as she began to transcribe, line for line, what she had heard during that call. Silas's tone, Lillian's giggle, the exact phrases. She documented them all with ruthless clarity, as if writing a statement for court. She needed it on paper to stop gaslighting herself into doubt. Her handwriting shook, but she didn't stop. It wasn't about confronting them. Not yet. This was about reclaiming her reality. If she couldn't scream, she would write. If she couldn't leave yet, she would prepare. Every word on the page was a piece of herself she was stitching back together. Once the transcript was done, she flipped to the next page and wrote a list titled, "What They Don't Know I Know." Under it, she listed the lease agreement Silas once casually mentioned, the work trips that coincided with Lillian's spa getaways, her own pregnancy scare last year, how Silas had seemed, distant rather than concerned. "Was I ever really your choice?" she wrote at the bottom. She closed the journal, pressing her palm flat on its cover, grounding herself. Her pain was still raw, but now it had form. It wasn't just floating rage anymore, it had become a quiet, calculated grief. And within that grief, something new was starting to grow. Clarity. She wasn't ready to burn it all down. Not yet. But when she did, she knew she wouldn't miss. Camila stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the soft pastel dress she had picked carefully for Lillian's birthday brunch. Her face bore subtle makeup, her curls pinned with delicate precision. She looked elegant, composed. But beneath the surface, her stomach churned. She had declined 3 invitations earlier that week before finally accepting this one. If there was ever a stage to test her composure, it was here. The venue was tastefully decorated, and laughter greeted her as she stepped in. Lillian beamed from the center of the room. "Camila," she squealed, hugging her. "You came." Camila smiled as if the embrace wasn't suffocating. "Of course I did," she said smoothly. "You're worth celebrating. It wasn't just a lie, it was a performance. Every second of this day would be." As the brunch progressed, Silas arrived with a large box wrapped in golden ribbon. "Had to fight 3 people for this," he joked as he placed it in Lillian's hands. Lillian gasped, tearing it open to reveal a silk scarf set she had once admired in a boutique. "Oh my God, you remembered!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. Camila watched with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Later, over champagne, Lillian turned to her and said, "Silas is too thoughtful. I keep telling him he's setting the bar too high for you." Camila raised her glass slightly. "That's all right," she replied softly. "Some bars are illusions anyway." Lillian's expression faltered briefly. Camila held her gaze. It was the first time her words had edges, and she intended for them to cut. No one else noticed the shift, but Camila did. She wasn't there to break down. She was there to remind them she wasn't blind. Later that evening, alone at home while Silas claimed to be meeting a client, Camila wandered into the bedroom and opened the drawer on his side of the bed. It wasn't an act of paranoia, it was clarity now. She found an envelope tucked beneath old documents, unsealed but folded shut. It was labeled in Silas's handwriting, "To be continued." Her chest tightened. She opened it slowly and pulled out what looked like a lease agreement. Her eyes scanned the details, and the name that hit her like a blow was L. Moore, listed as co-resident. Her heart raced, not because she was surprised, but because it confirmed what she already suspected. He was planning a future with Lillian, openly enough to put it in writing. The cowardice of it was almost laughable. She placed the papers back exactly as she found them and closed the drawer with deliberate calm. Her hands were steady. That scared her more than trembling. It meant her anger had become something colder, something sharper. She sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, staring at nothing before picking up her journal and writing in bold ink. "They're building a life." While I'm still standing in the ruins of the one they broke. She didn't cry. Not anymore. The tears had dried out days ago, and now her grief was turning into resolve. When Silas returned later that night, he greeted her with a kiss and a casual, "Client dragged the meeting too long." She smiled faintly, nodding. "It's all right. I used the time to organize a few things." And she had. She was organizing her evidence, her truth, and slowly her exit. The next morning, Christian showed up unannounced with coffee and his usual humor. "Thought I'd interrupt your weekend peace," he joked, holding up the cups. Camila let him in, grateful for the distraction, but nervous all the same. Christian, Silas's younger brother, had always been kind, perceptive, and strangely attuned to Camila's energy. As they sat in the living room sipping quietly, Christian tilted his head slightly and said, "You're quieter than usual. Is everything okay?" Camila paused, looking down at her coffee. "I've just been thinking," she replied carefully. He didn't push, but he didn't let it slide either. "You know, I used to think you and Silas were the standard," he said softly. "Now I'm not sure what I'm seeing." Camila looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "What are you seeing, Christian?" she asked. He studied her face for a moment before answering. A woman who's trying very hard not to fall apart in front of everyone. Camila didn't respond immediately. Her throat was too tight. Instead, she gave a weak smile and whispered, "Maybe you're seeing more than you should." He placed his coffee down gently. "Maybe I'm seeing just enough to know you're not all right," he said, "and that whatever's going on, deserve better." His words were so genuine, so gently spoken, that Camila had to blink back the tears threatening her composure. She looked away, nodding. Christian didn't press further. He knew better than to demand confessions from wounds still bleeding. But his presence brought something Camila hadn't felt in weeks, comfort without pretense. And for that moment, it was enough. Camila stood near the hallway mirror, adjusting the scarf around her neck when Silas entered the room, dressed sharply in a navy suit. "I'll be in Abuja for 2 days," he said while stuffing a charger into his bag. "Client wants a site review. Shouldn't take long." She didn't look at him. "That's fine. Safe travels," she murmured. Her voice was calm, even supportive. Silas leaned over, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "I'll call you tonight." Camila smiled, but her eyes were empty. Hours later, after he left, she didn't wait long before checking Lillian's Instagram story. She rarely posted publicly, but today she had a boomerang clip of a champagne bottle being opened in a cozy apartment that clearly wasn't her usual home. Camila paused the video and zoomed in. In the reflection of the glass, she saw it, broad shoulders, familiar posture, a man holding 2 glasses. The pit in her stomach deepened. She screen-recorded the clip and saved it. That night, Silas texted her, landed safely. "Long day ahead. Miss you." Camila stared at the message, then typed, "Get some rest," before deleting it and turning off her phone. She didn't need to play along tonight. Her silence was no longer a product of confusion. It was deliberate now. She sat on the couch in her robe, staring at the blank television screen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of her breathing. "He doesn't even try to hide anymore," she whispered to herself. She picked up her journal and wrote a new entry. "The only thing real in this marriage is the silence between us." She was no longer afraid of the truth. She was studying it, documenting it, and somewhere deep inside, she was preparing for the storm to come. The next afternoon, Camila opened the door to find Hannah holding a bag of groceries and a determined look. I brought soup, wine, and silence or conversation. Your choice, she said, stepping in without waiting. Camila gave a tired smile. All of the above, actually. They settled into the kitchen, cooking like they used to in university days, the smell of tomatoes and thyme filling the air. After some time, Camila placed a wine glass on the table and whispered, I need to tell you something. Hannah didn't react, she simply sat and waited. Camila exhaled deeply and began. She spoke in a slow, broken rhythm about the call, the voices, the lies, the photo reflections, the envelope. With each detail, Hannah's grip on her glass tightened. When Camila finished, silence filled the room. Hannah's eyes welled with angry tears. Camila, you've been sitting in this alone? Camila nodded. I couldn't say it out loud. It made it real. Hannah stood, walked around the table, and hugged her cousin tightly. This is real, but so are you. And I swear you will come out of this stronger than both of them. Camila rested her head on Hannah's shoulder, allowing herself to lean for the first time in weeks. I don't want to lose my dignity trying to fight them, she confessed. Hannah pulled back gently. Then don't fight loud. Fight smart. And fight once, just once, but so well that they never forget it. Camila's lips trembled. Those words didn't just offer comfort, they planted a strategy. The silence she had chosen wasn't weakness. It was preparation. That evening, Camila stood in front of her bathroom mirror, fresh from a hot shower, a cotton towel wrapped around her head. She stared at herself, at the tired eyes, the faint shadows beneath them, the curve of her mouth stuck somewhere between sorrow and stillness. She tilted her head slightly and whispered, Who are you becoming? Her reflection didn't answer, but it asked questions of its own. Camila reached for her moisturizer, applying it slowly, as if every motion might remind her body it still deserved care. She remembered a time when she loved mirrors, when she dressed with joy, not with the heavy weight of maintaining appearances. Now, every glance in the mirror felt like a performance review she was failing in silence. She stepped back and studied her form, then let her towel drop onto the counter. Her skin, her curves, her posture still intact. You are not broken, she said quietly to herself. You're just bending so you don't snap. That truth gave her the smallest comfort. She turned to her closet, choosing a silk nightdress she used to wear for Silas on special nights. Not tonight. Tonight she wore it for herself. She lit a candle by the bedside, climbed into bed, and pulled the covers up, not to sleep, but to rest her heart. The journal lay on the nightstand, and she opened it to a new page. Even the mirror reflects lies when you don't know what you're looking for, she wrote. But tonight she had looked, and she had seen herself, worn, yes, but present. And that was something worth holding on to. Camila sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, surrounded by an old shoebox of keepsakes, letters, photographs, faded boarding passes, and dusty birthday cards. At the bottom of the pile was a USB drive she hadn't touched in years. Plugging it into her laptop, she opened a folder labeled Wedding Prep. Inside were audio clips and voice memos from when she and Lillian planned the ceremony together. Pressing play on one, she heard Lillian's voice ring through the speakers. If I were you, I'd hold on to Silas with both hands. Men like him don't come twice. Camila leaned back against the wall, the irony slicing deeper than she expected. Back then, those words were meant as reassurance. Now they sounded like a cruel inside joke. Another voice note played next, Lillian laughing as she told Camila to stop overthinking the seating chart, joking. At the end of the day, it's you and him. Nothing else matters. Camila's fingers curled slowly into fists. Lillian had always positioned herself as the grounding voice in Camila's moments of doubt. But now she realized, Lillian hadn't just known her vulnerabilities. She had memorized them, stored them like ammunition. You studied me, Camila murmured aloud, and then you used me. Her stomach turned as she scrolled through the rest of the files. She didn't delete them. Instead, she copied everything into a new folder on her desktop and named it Receipts. The betrayal wasn't just happening in the present. It had lived, thrived, and echoed from the past. It was at a family lunch hosted by their aunt that Christian finally voiced what had been weighing on him. They stood by the grill outside, the noise of relatives and children muffled by the distance. You seem distracted lately, Christian said to Silas, handing him a drink. Silas shrugged, eyes avoiding his brother's. Work's been insane. Christian took a slow sip, then said carefully, "It's not just work, man. It's Camila. She looks hollow. Like she's in the room but not in it. You see that, right?" Silas chuckled dryly. "She's sensitive, always has been." That answer made Christian's jaw tighten. "Don't dismiss her like that. You used to light up just talking about her. Now you act like she's a burden." Silas shifted uncomfortably. "Look, you don't know everything." Christian stepped closer. "Then tell me, because I hate seeing her fade like that. And you're acting like there's nothing to be responsible for." Silas muttered, "Maybe we're just not in sync anymore." Christian's eyes narrowed. "You don't fall out of sync with someone like Camila unless you jump ship." There was a long pause between them. Silas didn't respond. Christian didn't need him to. The silence said enough. "If you're doing something you shouldn't be," Christian added, his tone sharp now, "just remember, she's not the kind of woman who stays broken. She rebuilds without you." Then he walked away, leaving Silas alone by the smoke and burning coals. It was the first time anyone had forced Silas to look at what he was destroying. The long table was set beautifully in the center of Camila's garden, filled with flickering candles, white plates, and a curated playlist humming softly in the background. It was meant to be a light dinner with close friends, nothing formal, just warmth and laughter. But to Camila it felt like theater. She played hostess with flawless grace, serving wine, laughing on cue, and complimenting outfits. When Lillian arrived in a floral dress, arm brushing past Silas with casual familiarity, Camila's eyes flicked to the contact like a reflex. "You two always match," a friend teased. "It's like you share a style guide." Camila raised her glass and said, "Oh, I'm sure they align in more ways than one." The words were veiled, but they pierced. Lillian coughed into her drink. Silas glanced at Camila, unsure if he had just imagined the ice beneath her smile. As the night wore on, Camila sat across from the two people who had unknowingly turned her into an audience of her own betrayal. She studied their chemistry, the synchronized laughter, the way Lillian subtly sought Silas's attention before speaking. The others didn't notice. Why would they? Camila had once missed it too, but now the performance was only half theirs. Hers was better. Her heart beat evenly, her posture never once faltered. Inside, though, she cataloged every interaction like a forensic investigator. When dessert was served, Lillian said, "Cam, this lemon tart tastes like the one you made at our old apartment. Remember?" Camila smiled. "I remember a lot of things," she said softly. Lillian's grin faltered. That was the only moment she showed a crack. But Camila saw it, and it was enough to know the mask was loosening. This wasn't just dinner. It was the beginning of reckoning. Camila waited until after midnight to pull the envelope from beneath the wardrobe box where she'd hidden it. Her hands were dry, her movements calm. No music, no distractions, just her heartbeat steady now, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she was past fear. She sat at the vanity, opened the envelope, and unfolded the lease document again. This time, she read every line like it was scripture, methodical, detached. The address was unfamiliar, but her eyes locked onto the line that confirmed it. Co-occupant, Moore, Lillian A. It was no coincidence, no initials to hide behind. They hadn't even tried to mask it. Her breath didn't quicken. Her pulse didn't race. She merely closed the document, then leaned forward, whispering to her reflection, "I hope you both paid your first rent, because I'm collecting something far more expensive." She placed the lease on the bed and grabbed her phone, scrolling through past texts from Silas that now read like theater lines. "Stuck in traffic, babe. Long meeting. I'll make it up to you." Each lie had a timestamp. She copied the lease into a folder on her laptop titled Departure. The name was deliberate. This wasn't a revenge mission, it was an evacuation plan. The next page in her journal read simply, "I've seen the smoke long enough. I won't wait for the fire to consume me." She didn't cry. There were no emotional theatrics, just a clean, bitter line drawn between what was and what would no longer be. That night, she slept with the envelope under her pillow, not because it comforted her, but because it reminded her of one simple fact: the truth no longer hid in shadows. It now had a signature and a date. Camila dressed simply that afternoon, a crisp white blouse, dark jeans, her locks in a low bun. She wasn't going for confrontation. She just needed to see it for herself. The address on the lease led her to a modest apartment complex on a quiet street. She parked 2 buildings away and walked slowly, each step deliberate. Standing at the base of the staircase, she looked up at the second-floor unit listed on the form. The curtains were drawn, but the balcony held 2 chairs, wine glasses still sitting on the side table, a woman's scarf draped casually over the rail. There were sneakers she recognized by the door, and a sandal she knew wasn't hers. Her chest didn't constrict. Her lips didn't quiver. She simply stood there, taking it all in as if studying a crime scene where the victim had survived. She didn't knock. She didn't ring. She turned away quietly, like a guest who had changed her mind. The air felt heavier, but her steps were lighter. She returned to her car, rolled down the window, and sat for a few moments staring at nothing. Inside, her emotions didn't spiral, they aligned. Her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. There would be no confrontation at that door, no shouting match in borrowed space. Let them decorate their betrayal. Let them drink wine where they built deceit. She drove home slowly, passing the park where Silas once told her he dreamed of raising children. She remembered that lie, too. That night, she cooked her own dinner, plated it beautifully, poured a glass of red wine, and ate in silence. Across from her sat an empty chair. For the first time, it didn't feel lonely, it felt honest. It was Christian who showed up again, unannounced but somehow right on time. He stepped into Camila's living room holding a small takeout bag. "Didn't know if you'd eaten. Thought I'd gamble," he said with a soft smile. Camila's lips curved faintly. "You always did show up with food when words failed," she replied. They sat side by side on the couch, silence hanging comfortably between them. She didn't explain the shadows under her eyes or the heaviness in her movements. He didn't ask. Instead, he placed the bag on the table and looked at her with quiet concern. "Camila, are you okay?" he asked finally. She didn't lie. She shook her head once, then whispered, "I'm learning to be." Christian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, then spoke gently. "I don't know what's going on, but I've watched you hold your own in rooms that tried to shrink you. You're not someone people just get over." Camila blinked fast, but one tear escaped anyway. He reached for her hand, no romance, no pressure, just presence. "You don't deserve silence in a space that once promised to hold you," he added. Camila's voice trembled. "They made a fool of me, Christian." He shook his head. "No, they fooled themselves into thinking you wouldn't wake up." The words didn't heal, but they softened something sharp inside her. She leaned into him, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. For a moment, she allowed herself to be seen, not as a woman holding it together, but as one rediscovering what it meant to be held without conditions. That was something Silas had forgotten, but Christian hadn't. The night was still when Camila opened her eyes, unable to sleep. The air in her bedroom felt thick, like it carried the weight of everything she hadn't yet said. She sat up, stared at her phone for a long while, then finally picked it up and scrolled to Silas's name. Her fingers hovered above the call button. This wouldn't be a confrontation, it would be confirmation. She pressed dial. It rang once. Twice. He picked up groggily. "Cam, everything okay?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't waste a second. "I know about the apartment," she said. Silence followed. Not the shocked kind, but the kind that confirms guilt. "And I know who Elmore is. I saw the lease." His breath caught slightly, then he muttered, "You shouldn't have gone through my things." "I shouldn't have had to," she replied, her voice eerily calm. "I stayed quiet to see how far you'd go. Now I know." He started, "Camila, I can explain," but she cut him off. "Don't insult me with stories. I've heard enough lies in your laughter." Another pause. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice cracking with panic. "Not where you left me," she whispered. And then, without waiting for another word, she ended the call. Her fingers didn't shake. Her chest didn't tighten. She simply placed the phone face down on the nightstand and lay back in bed. There would be no grand fight, no screaming match. Just that one call, a line drawn clean in the quiet. And when the phone buzzed minutes later with his name on the screen, she didn't answer. Let him sit in the silence she had mastered. Early the next morning, Camila stood in their bedroom with a suitcase beside her and a pen in hand. She'd written many letters in her life, but never one like this. The page before her bore no apologies, no accusations, only truth. Silas, she began, I won't list what you've done. You already know. This letter isn't for you to understand me. It's to remind myself I didn't imagine it all. She kept her words sharp but restrained. I'm not leaving because I'm weak. I'm leaving because I finally remembered who I was before I met you. She ended the note with a simple sentence. By the time you read this, I'll be long gone. Then she placed the letter on his side of the bed, and beside it, the ring he once gave her. Not tarnished, just returned. She walked through the house one last time. Not mourning it, not angry, just done. Her heels echoed on the hardwood floor as she moved through the living room and glanced at the family portrait still hanging by the fireplace. She didn't take it down. Let it stay, a reminder of what appearances had hidden. In the kitchen, she paused briefly, touched the handle of the drawer where she'd once kept his favorite spoons. Even those memories felt like lies now. Camila stepped out into the fresh morning air, her bag in hand, her journal zipped inside it. Her driver waited in silence. As the car pulled away, she didn't look back. Because there was nothing left to look back at, just a house full of things. She wasn't escaping. She was exiting with dignity. And that made all the difference. Weeks later, Camila stepped into a well-decorated hall for a bridal shower hosted by one of their mutual friends. She hadn't planned to attend, but something in her told her it was time. She arrived in a fitted emerald green dress, her skin glowing, her presence composed but firm. Gasps rippled through the room. People whispered. Some looked away, unsure of what they knew or didn't. Lillian stood near the dessert table, mid-laughter, until she caught sight of Camila. Her face paled slightly, her smile froze. Camila didn't flinch. She walked toward the bride-to-be, hugged her warmly, and dropped a gift card in the box. Then, slowly, deliberately, she turned to Lillian and smiled. Only her eyes didn't smile. Stepping closer, Camila leaned in and whispered into Lillian's ear. You were right. I was desperate, but not for love. Truth. And now I have it. Lillian stiffened. Camila pulled back and added with a calm confidence. Everyone knows now. Before Lillian could respond, Camila turned and walked away. Murmurs grew louder behind her. Eyes followed her exit. She didn't owe anyone explanations, but her presence had spoken volumes. No slaps, no shouting, just grace wrapped in revelation. Outside, Camila exhaled deeply and got into her waiting car. That moment wasn't revenge, it was closure. She had walked into a room full of history, faced the betrayal standing in heels, and walked out unbroken. That was her win. Not just being free, but being fearless. Silas sat on the edge of their bed, gripping the letter Camila had left behind as if the paper itself might suddenly change its words. The ring she'd placed beside it burned into his palm, heavy, symbolic, final. The house felt alien without her presence, every corner echoing the weight of her absence. He checked his phone again, no new messages, no responses. He had called her sister, her colleagues, even her mother, who had calmly said, Camila is safe. That's all you need to know. He had gone by Hannah's place, but Hannah had looked him squarely in the face and said, You're not welcome here, Silas. Not after what you did. He tried defending himself. You don't know the full story. But Hannah only crossed her arms. Camila didn't disappear, Silas. She finally saw the truth and chose herself. That terrifies you, doesn't it? For the first time in years, Silas felt the consequence of his charm no longer working. The women who once adored him, Camila, Lillian, even her mother, now offered silence or contempt. He sat in the driveway outside their home until midnight, hoping she might appear, that this was just a dramatic phase. But when the lights stayed off and the silence persisted, panic began to replace pride. He returned inside, walking through the rooms with a ghost-like stillness. Her scarf was no longer on the coat rack. Her journals were gone. Only the memory of her voice remained, echoing in the spaces he had taken for granted. In a moment of desperation, he opened her side of the closet, emptied. Her absence wasn't just physical. It was surgical, precise, intentional. He whispered to no one, Camila, come back. But there was no answer, just silence, and for once he couldn't escape it. Lillian's world didn't collapse in a single moment. It crumbled in quiet increments. At first, it was the change in tone from friends during conversations, the hesitations, the subtle exclusion from brunch invites. Then came the rumors, circulated gently but laced with truth. Someone had seen Camila leaving the bridal shower with her head held high. Someone else had overheard the whisper. And soon the story unraveled. Her fiancé, Marvin, was the first to confront her. He stood at the kitchen counter one evening, holding his phone. "Lillian, why is your name on a lease with Silas?" Her throat dried. "What are you talking about?" He tossed the paper onto the table. "I have a friend in property management. They confirmed it, you and Silas, an apartment. 2 months ago." She reached for it, but he pulled it back. "Don't insult me by pretending." Marvin didn't yell. His voice broke in the way quiet voices do when the damage is irreparable. "Camila trusted you. I trusted you." Lillian stood frozen. "It didn't mean anything," she muttered. But the words sounded empty even to her. Marvin shook his head, stepping away. "You betrayed a woman who would have taken a bullet for you. And for what? A man who couldn't even stay faithful in his own home." Within days, the engagement was off. The diamond ring returned. Her social circles, once vibrant, grew cold. Invitations stopped coming. She received looks in the office, pity mixed with judgment. Her once confident walk through the corridors now felt like a walk of shame. She called Silas, angry. "You promised me we'd have a life. Now I've lost everything." His reply was cold. "Camila left me too. We both lost. That was the final blow." Lillian realized too late that the man she gambled her world for had no idea how to protect it or her. Camila sat on a wooden bench at the edge of a quiet lake, a light breeze tugging gently at the sleeves of her cream blouse. In her lap rested the journal that had carried her pain for months. She flipped through the pages slowly, each one marked with entries soaked in confusion, disappointment, discovery, and resolve. But today she held a pen to write the final words. This journal began with betrayal. It ends with peace. She paused, then added, "They thought I was too desperate to see the truth. But desperation never blinded me. It taught me where to look." She exhaled deeply, her eyes glistening, but no tears fell. The last page felt lighter than all the others. She no longer needed it to make sense of what had happened. She had lived it, endured it, and come out on the other side. She closed the journal and held it against her chest for a moment, then placed it gently into her bag. A woman walking her dog passed by and smiled at her. Camila smiled back, genuine, small but real. For the first time in a long while, she felt no weight on her shoulders, no ache in her chest. She didn't know exactly what came next, but she wasn't afraid of that anymore. Her peace no longer depended on validation, on titles, or even on justice. It came from knowing that she had walked through fire and refused to become ashes. She whispered to herself, "I'm still here." And in that quiet affirmation, something settled. Not revenge, not regret, just release. She stood from the bench and walked away, leaving behind the stillness of the water, but carrying within her the kind of calm no storm could ever steal again. The market square buzzed gently that morning, filled with vendors calling out prices and the scent of freshly baked pastries wafting through the air. Camila strolled through the open stalls in a flowing olive dress, woven bag in hand, soaking in the simplicity she had once overlooked. She paused near a stand selling handmade bracelets, her fingers brushing over the delicate beads, when a familiar voice called her name. She turned, and there was Christian, dressed casually in a denim shirt, holding a bag of oranges and smiling like the world hadn't just collapsed months ago. "You always did have a thing for markets," he said, stepping closer. Camila smiled gently, surprised but not unsettled. "And you always knew where to find me." They stood for a beat, neither rushing to fill the silence. It was the kind of calm that didn't beg to be explained. They walked slowly through the aisles, their pace unhurried, their conversation light at first. He told her about a youth mentorship project he had joined, and she spoke of the freelance writing gigs she'd taken on. Stories from women who, like her, had endured and still kept walking. Eventually, they sat on a bench near the garden edge of the market, sipping local fruit drinks in plastic cups. Christian turned to her, his tone softer. "I don't want to assume anything, Camila, but if you ever feel ready, not to start over, just to start something honest, I'd like to be a part of that." Camila studied his face, her heart steady. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "I'm not rushing into anything, but I value peace now. and your presence feels a lot like peace. There were no promises, no dramatic declarations, just two people meeting at the intersection of healing and possibility. And in that moment, it was enough. Months later, Camila stood before a modest audience in a warmly lit room, a small women's seminar hosted by a local community group. Behind her, a banner read, "Reclaiming the Narrative, Voices that Chose Themselves." Dressed in a deep maroon blouse and crisp slacks, her natural hair pulled back into a regal bun, she radiated quiet strength. Her voice, though gentle, carried weight. "I'm not here to speak as a victim," she began. "I'm here as someone who stayed on the line long enough to hear the truth." The room fell still. Eyes locked onto her as she shared her story, not the sensational details, but the emotional truths. The moment clarity replaced confusion, the quiet decision to walk away, the rediscovery of herself outside someone else's shadow. Her words weren't rehearsed. They were lived, raw, refined, and redemptive. She looked out across the room and saw heads nodding, tears slipping quietly down cheeks. "Sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness," she continued. "But silence, when chosen, is strength. It's patience. It's the prelude to something powerful." A young woman raised her hand and asked, "How did you know it was time to go?" Camila smiled. "When staying meant losing myself more than leaving did." The crowd murmured softly, moved. At the end of her talk, as applause rose around her, Camila closed her journal on the podium, her fingers resting gently on the cover. She stepped down not to fanfare, but to a long line of women who wanted to say thank you. That night, she walked to her car under the silver glow of a crescent moon, her heels steady against the pavement. No tears, no ache, just peace. Not because everything had healed, but because she had. And that was enough to begin again.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.